Emmanuel here with a quick take on economics, talking about trade, development, talking about industrialization. Our question today is if I'm sitting somewhere, if I had a machine that I could jig up, press some buttons and things happen in the economy, including most importantly, like our incomes rise, what would those buttons be? Well, okay, people might have different metaphors, but today we want to use factor inputs. Now, economists use the term factor inputs to describe this, the say the elements that are used to produce output, right? Economic output, because ultimately, in the very first place, when we talk about raising our incomes, reducing poverty, we are talking about increasing output, right? Output raises our incomes, and increased output can also lead to reduced unemployment, right? All things equal. Now, the factor inputs: land, labor, capital. We also have institutions, material, and technology. All right, these are the basic factor inputs. Now, for the rest of this video, we're going to try and understand and describe what these factor inputs are, so that moving forward, we can understand what role they play in making us all wealthier in any given country, right? Now, you fly around the country, or you look around you, you're going to see some of these factor inputs. Starting off with land or natural resource, right? Land or natural resource are all those things that we just found them here ever since man was born and found himself on earth so many thousands of years ago. Just came and hey, natural resource was there. Labor, the very basic property the man has, right? His hands, his feet, his means of locomotion. Capital. Now, capital are all those, Adam Smith defined them as the items, the goods that a man expects to derive some value from, right? So there are many types of capital, but the broad category is capital. We have, for example, human capital, which is distinguished from labor in this way. If labor is just all our locomotion, our hands and legs, right? Human capital is all in here, in the mind, knowledge, right? The education you have actually changes your level of human capital. So individuals have human capital, groups of people have a level of human capital, and so on. The world has a level of human capital. And finally, we have materials and institutions, right? Materials are those, when we talk about production and the process of production, materials are actually changed from one form into another, like a tree, right? You cut down the tree, you put it, or rather, lumber, right? You put it through the process, and you change it into a table, right? A desk, a chair. In that process of changing it into a chair, there's all the items that did not change. Economists refer to them as factors of production, right? And they are distinguishable from the outputs, right? And distinguishable from materials. And then finally, we have institutions. So institutions are actually just rules. So an institution is not a building. It's These are the rules that govern interactions between economic actors, right? They are the rules that actually create the market. So, for example, the institutions or the rules might say that you cannot trade hearts on the on the market. You can't buy and sell hearts, but you can donate a heart, right? Those are market rules that have created a market for the trade in hearts, but have restricted it in some way. To close off, when we talk about institutions at the very, very highest level, scholars have identified at least 3 or 4 institutions that seem to guarantee a level of wealth and prosperity for a country. These are free markets, a limited government, the rule of law, and private property. So if I have the ownership, the rights, private property rights, the rule, then like that means that I can buy and sell my property as I see fit, right? I can allocate it the way I want. If the markets are free, the markets are free markets. No one is telling you, how do we, the best, okay, or rather the best definition of free markets that I can come up with at this moment is that you are not directed in how you trade your goods and services, how you change ownership, right? Allocation, you are free to allocate as you see fit, right? Property rights and free markets are intertwined in that way. I can own property and I can allocate it as I see fit. Limited government. So you can't have the government everywhere, right? That there is evidence to suggest that a limited government is more conducive to a prosperous society. So too much meddling is not good. Now that really has to do with many things, including the fact that government incentives are not like private and entrepreneurial incentives, right? And so the government tends to be inefficient in when it if it's engaged in the market. So too much government, too many rules, right? Too much government presence is not conducive to prosperity. A good example of this is excessive certification. If I have to have a certificate to do people's hair, and then separate certificate to do people's nails, and then another certificate to to basically conduct the kinds of activities that would be readily regulated by the market itself, right? Then that is excessive presence of the government. Because let's say doing your hair, for example, if you have to pay whatever sum of money to do your hair, to do people's hair, let's say if you had a high barrier like $1,000, and that means that those individuals who are trying to use that means of entrepreneurship, right, offering that service, they're trying to use that service to get wealthier, to move themselves up, then they're going to find a barrier to entry. So that is one way that excessive government can show up. And when we talk about the rule of law, well, look, things happen, my property is stolen, I can actually have a way of recourse. I can go to the courts. There are police who will try to apprehend the perpetrator. They will look for him. They will, and if they catch him, the perpetrator will be prosecuted, and he will not be able to go scot-free for stealing my property. That's it for factor inputs. Now, finally, technology. This is a very, very, very important factor input for this. What is technology? Economists distinguish, have a different understanding of technology than we do when we speak in everyday language. Everyday language, when we refer to technology, we usually referring to some kind of a technical gizmo, some device. Maybe it has a semiconductor chip inside. Maybe it can do something very highly technical. It has a screen. I'm sure you get the picture. But for economists, technology is actually just know-how. It is the way to do things. And technology is distinguished from human capital and labor in this way. I could know in my mind about the science of plumbing, but I need to have a practical way of plumbing. Let's take an even simpler example. Before we mentioned tables, right? The production of a table. Well, if there are so many, I could know through my education, I could know the science, right, of making tables. That's human capital. Now, if I know the many different ways to combine factor inputs to produce a table, that is know-how. Different combinations, different ways of making tables. Now, if there is a specific table, there's that table sitting in your living room right now or in your office. If I know the specific way to make that specific table, well, economists will call that productive knowledge, right? That is, knowledge is very specific about a specific process. So they'll separate between those two forms of know-how. Know-how in its very specific form and know-how in its general, all-encompassing form. Combination. Now think about Legos, right? If you've got a lot of Legos in a box, then they can represent the level of know-how. If I've got more Legos than you, I have more combinations and more different things that I can make. A society with a high level of know-how, a society could actually have a high level of human capital but have very low level of know-how. But why would know-how be important in the first place? Well, we'll talk a bit more about that in a separate video, but know this. I can know the science of something but not know how to do it, right? How to actually practically do it. I've got to figure that out too. Know-how is measured through economic complexity, right? The country that produces something very complex like a Lexus vehicle, that's Japan, has a very high level of know-how, because if you go to Japan and they've got so many ways of doing so many different things, they can reconfigure. They got so many Legos, right? The Lego box is filled. They could take those blocks and build many more things than a country like Kenya, right? A country with a lower level of know-how. Cheers. Have a good one. It's been Emmanuel. Factor inputs. Questions on economics.